You are listening to Single Smart Female. This is Jen, explaining the possibilities in your love life and examining your mantourage dating experiences. I am here to help you do life and love on your terms by tipping the scales of love permanently in your favor. So don't forget to text this episode to all of your single smart girlfriends, and let's get started. Hello, single smart female. It's your romantic fairy godmama. And today, we have a romantic, probably not so quickie, but definitely fascinating. So we are doing, topic is today, the type of men I dislike the most. And this is part one. I'm not quite sure how many parts there are going to be. Today, we're only talking about one specific man because I have a really fascinating story for you. But I do want you to know that this will be continuation, possibly 2 parts, possibly maybe 3 or 4, not quite sure yet. We will see. Now, before we get started, I had said a long time ago when I first started this, and I continue to say this, the more good you find in men, the more good men you will find, okay? With that said, there are specific kinds of men that not only do I dislike, but I really dislike and sometimes even hate. And that first type of man that we're going to talk about today is lazy men. Now, this can also be lazy as in financially lazy as well. And I've been married to one of those men. My first marriage was to one of these type of men. And I don't hate him. Let me make that very, very clear. But I do have a very big dislike for mooches, okay? But we're broadening the category, and I'm just saying lazy men in general. And lazy men are something that we find out usually quite quickly with mantourage dating when you do it the right way, because they're not really truly interested in stepping up to be your man. And that's what mantourage dating, when you do it the right way, that's what happens. And it shows you what kind of men are actually interested and that are not lazy men who actually care about you and what makes you happy as well. But a lot of women never see that, so we try really, really hard to make these men do stuff when it's very easy when you learn how to mantourage date the right way, which is what I spend a lot of time helping women do in secret society together so that they can see these men step up and step up and step up over time, because it's not just about the honeymoon phase in the first couple weeks when everything's sweet and he's amazing and blah, 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 until the first time you have sex. And then, no, you're looking to see if a guy has actual relationship potential. You want to see how he shows up over time, not just in the first few weeks when he's super excited to meet you at the beginning. And mantourage dating automatically inspires men to do that without you having to tell them to do it. It is a brilliant system for your love life. Now, with that said, again, lazy men, don't like them. Some cases hate them. Not my ex-husband. I don't hate my ex-husband by any means. Let me make that very, very clear. He taught me so much. I have no contact with him anymore, so I have no idea what's going on in his life, but I hope he has outgrown the laziness. It is one of the most unattractive qualities in a man. Now, there are men who maybe don't take as good care of themselves that aren't lazy, but I like it when men take care of themselves. I like it when men are, self-directed and they have their own ambitions, or even if they're not super ambitious, they're steadfast, they're hard workers, they do those things. Now, where do I get my extreme dislike for lazy men? And by the way, it's not just from my ex-husband. So my dad hates lazy people more than anybody I have ever met in my life. And as you know, if you've listened to this podcast for a while, my dad and I had a very tumultuous relationship. And at times, it's still challenging. But on the same page, we've really grown. I really recognize and learn from him that lazy people have massive character flaws that make it really challenging as a smart, successful, ambitious woman to have a great relationship with them. What I'm trying to say is, at the beginning, I probably my first marriage was probably in spite of my father because of our tumultuous relationship. But on the same page, he ended up teaching me that this, again, is a massive character flaw, and it's something that you should consider in somebody that you're getting into a relationship with. And there's lots of different factors that go into lazy, but definitely something you should consider. And it has inspired my extreme dislike. Now, his is a hate. It's a lethal hate for lazy people, but it actually saved his life. And that's the interesting story that I was going to say fun, but I wouldn't exactly call this a fun story, but it's a very interesting story that I'm going to share with you today. So this actually saved my father's life and his roommate's life back in the 1970s, his extreme hate for lazy people. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background, and then I'm going to let you in on a conversation that I recorded between me and my father. He's told me this story several times now, and this is the first time I've decided to talk about it publicly because it's a fascinating story about a notorious serial killer that he came in contact with in the 1970s. Just to set the stage here, if you like true crime, I'm your girl for today. Never thought you were going to get that on a dating podcast, did you? With your romantic fairy godmama. But for today, we're going to do a little true crime. Now, there's no mystery to solve. The mystery has already been solved, but it's just an interesting side story in this serial killer story. Now, with that said, I'm going to let you listen to, when it went back, and just to make sure I had some of the details correct, I recorded a conversation between me and my father. So you can listen to us engage. At the end of the conversation, you'll hear him call me Pump, which is his nickname for me is Pumpkin. Just so you know, because the audio gets a little if you're wondering what he says. But that is his nickname for me. And I will let you listen to that conversation and some of the details. So anyway, we are going into the story. Now, the lazy person in question is not the prime serial killer. It's an accomplice that my dad engaged with in the 1970s. So background, we are specifically talking about the most notorious Houston serial killer, which is, his name is Dean Corll. And his killings were between 1970 and 1973, where he was actually shot and killed by his own accomplice, which is the man that my father engaged with, which is the lazy man in question, whose name is, and he's still alive to this day and in prison, Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. Now, the backstory is my father, he has been working since he was 10, and when he got to Houston after he got through high school, the first thing he did was become an entrepreneur, and he owned different very small companies. One of those companies being a rose business, which was very popular back then, and they made really good money hiring young boys and men in order to sell roses on the corner. And that was one of his first businesses. And he did this with his roommates, Buckley and Luke. My father's name is Roger, by the way. Now, the story sort of goes that he ended up meeting the accomplice, who in his own right is a serial killer. I don't remember exactly all the details. I believe he participated. It was questionable because I think he didn't want to confess of all of his involvement. He basically, the accomplice was, he was a young man who the serial killer, Dean Corll, was an electrician by trade, and his parents owned a candy making company in the 1960s and 70s, and he was in his early 30s. He recruited, by promises of money, these two young men to basically have him get young men that he would take home and tie to a torture board. And these are young men starting from like the age of, I believe, 11 through all the way through their early 20s. So he would torture them, rape them, and then kill them. And if I'm not mistaken, they're still not sure about the exact final count, but it's been between 28 and 38. This was a lot of young men that he did these absolutely unspeakable things to. And this accomplice, Elmer Wayne Henley Jr., there was another accomplice as well. He was recruited by Corll to basically bring him these young men. So the story starts with my father's involvement, that Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. had two younger brothers that Paul, and my father thinks the second one's name was Matthew. He can't remember exactly for sure. They were around 13, 14 years old, who he had hired to sell roses on the corner for him. And the story starts when he met Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. for the first time. And this is also the only time that he met Dean Corll, the mastermind himself, when he went to go pick up the young boys to go for work. My father did. And they said to him that they couldn't work because they needed to help their mother move. The mother was single and she needed to move down the street. So my father says to them, hey, go ask your mom if you can work today. I promise tomorrow morning, bright and early, we will bring 3 trucks and move you guys. Okay? And so they run inside. The mother says, absolutely. So they get to work that day because that was my father and his roommates. That was their biggest day for production, was on a Saturday. Sunday morning rolls around. They show up at their house, my father and his roommates, Buckley and Luke, and they show up with 3 trucks and they start to move them. At the same time, Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. shows up with Dean Corll, and that's the first time that my father meets them and assesses his views on both of these men. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go into the interview so you can basically see what happened and how this hate for lazy people actually saved my father's life and his roommate's life, because they ended up not getting permanently entangled and they had, boundaries around themselves, which is something I always preach to you ladies. And by the way, if you need help with boundaries, that's very important in dating. Datingboundaries.com. Go get a free class from me on dating boundaries specifically. Now, the story's a little bit different, but boundaries in general are extraordinarily important in all kinds of engagement and will protect you quite a bit, even in scenarios that you don't even know what's going on. So I want to let you in on a little bit before I take you into the interview. Basically, it seems like, from an outsider perspective, is that my dad and his roommates were possibly being targeted and groomed in order for this to happen. And it was a very short engagement, so it's not like this was grooming over a long period of time, but trying to create the opportunity for them to be targets of this serial killer. And all of this because A, my dad hates lazy people, and B, he has good boundaries around lazy people. For some people, they would say it was a little excessive, but in my opinion, sometimes extreme measures are really important. But his overreaction to this, again, saved his life and very possibly saved his roommate's life. So without further ado, remember, lazy men, they are not somebody to get into a relationship with, okay? And also, I want you ladies to remember to have good dating boundaries. With that said, let's go into our interesting true crime story right now. Okay, so you first met him because you had hired his brother?
His 2 younger brothers had worked for me for a pretty good while. I didn't even know they had an older brother.
Do you remember their names?
Paul was one of them, but I don't remember the young. I want to say Matthew.
What age? Approximately what age were they?
Paul was probably 13, 14, 15.
Okay. And so you met them when you went to go move them down the street?
That's when, that Sunday morning, that's when Loudmouth Wayne and No Talk Dean showed up.
Did you know Dean was an electrician?
I thought he worked for the telephone company.
And so they showed up and just sat there and did nothing?
All Wayne did was run his mouth.
What did he run his mouth about? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember. I didn't pay him no money, just a thug.
He was just a what?
A thug.
Okay.
And he didn't help his mom. He wasn't helping us. I mean, he just running his mouth. I instantly didn't like it. I mean, that's his mama. But anyway.
Okay, was it just his mama there? There's no dad?
No, they broke up or whatever. I never met the dad. He'd been gone some time.
So it was just his mama. Were the boys helping? It was you and who else was your roommate? I forgot his name.
The boys were helping. and Luke.
Buck and Luke.
Yeah.
And you guys brought 3 trucks?
3 trucks, yeah.
Okay. And you moved them down the street.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you had asked him to work on a Friday or a Saturday?
It was a Saturday. That was our big day, sale day. I really needed it.
Okay. So the next time you saw Elmer, Wayne Henley Jr., was at a party, right?
Yeah, the next time, yeah.
And who brought him?
Buckley.
Buckley. And Buckley came up to you and said that he'd offer for you guys to go do some mushrooms?
There was a bunch of us in that house and just partying, and he came up to me.
Was the party at your house or somebody else's?
Yeah, mine and Buck and Luke's house. We were renting it.
Okay. Yours and Buckley and Luke's house. Was this in the Heights?
Oh, yeah.
And you guys were having the party?
Yeah.
And so who came up to you and said, let's go do some mushrooms?
Buckley came up and told me that, and I said something like, you could tell him to go stick it or something, whatever. I didn't like it.
Okay.
Never did.
And so he said that he has some mushrooms?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's what the talk was about.
Okay. Did Buckley go with him?
No.
No? Okay. Is it because that you decided you didn't want to go? He didn't go?
Probably so, I guess.
So you probably saved his life.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, was it Buckley that said that he could stay there?
Yeah, that came about probably within a few weeks. He asked if it'd be all right if he stayed the night. And I told him go ask for Luke, which I knew Luke would say okay. I turned into 2, 3, I don't know, 4 nights. I was sick of seeing him. I just made up my mind coming back home one night. I said, he's laying on that couch. He's going out the front door. He did.
Okay. So then you picked him up off the couch and dragged him outside and threw him off the porch?
I pulled him off the couch. He was upright, and I shoved him to the front door, which I had the main door open and the screen door. Then I walked over there and I pushed him on out on, and he went flying. We had a little concrete patio, which was probably a foot high off the ground. And he went off of it. Looked like, somebody diving in a swimming pool.
So he hit the concrete?
No, he hit the ground off the concrete.
Okay.
And he looked back at me and got up and left. I never seen him again.
He didn't say a word?
Not a word.
Not a word. Okay. And did you say a word, did anything to him? Or did you just throw him out?
No, I just stood there and looked at him.
Did he already know beforehand that you were aggravated with him being there?
I had no idea. I didn't have no communication with him at all.
Okay. No. So you never talked to him the 4 days you were there? He was there?
No.
Okay. And that you had been on a date with Gloria, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so on the 4th day, you were like, I'm done with him. All right. This is such a fascinating story. And then a year later, you found out, you heard on the news, on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were talking to your friend, your roommate,
right.
And y'all put it together that was the same person?
Well, when Greg told me Paul, the name Paul, that zeroed me in on it. It'd been a year since I'd seen Paul or his brother.
And what did they tell you why they stopped working for you, or did you guys move on businesses, or what?
No, that was just typical with boys. They'd grow up a little bit, and that was it.
Okay.
Pretty typical. I better get busy, Tom.
All right. Thanks for the story, Dad.
All right. Love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Lover Girl. Thanks for joining me today and texting this episode to all of your single smart girlfriends. If you have a question that you'd like to submit for on-air consideration or want to learn more about working with me, then meet me over at singlesmartfemale.com. See you there.